Throughout my life, the one constant in my taste in games is that I've loved platformers. From Mario Galaxy to A Hat in Time, this genre consistently contains some of the best games out there. Now, I'm not saying all platformers are winners. Of course not. But at their peak, it's hard to find someone who plays games that doesn't love a good platformer. Even if so many people limit their platforming repertoire to games about the same. Turd-crushing Italian fat ass. That's right, Wario. Don't think you can pretty privilege your way out of this one. There's a lot of really good platformers that I don't hear talked about a lot. For example, I absolutely love the platformer Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom. You wanna know why? Well, so would I. Let's find out. Let's start by analysing the dynamics, aesthetics, and mechanics of Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom. Let's start with where all players start, with the aesthetics. The flippers is going on here. Okay, maybe it'll help if I play it again at 8 times speed. Nope, that did not help. Okay, maybe if I break it down. Well, what we've seen is definitely striking, but when we talk about aesthetics, we're not talking about how the game looks. Well, we are, but it's more than that. We are talking about how the game feels. And there's so many different categories we can fit games into. Let's go over them and see which ones apply. First off is sensation. I think you can tell by watching the game that it is constantly bombarding you with sensations. The game plays like it has ADHD. And while styled retro, it's not afraid to break those constraints when it fits the visual style. For example, I don't think an early 3D console could manage that many particle effects. But the uncluttered textures and the low poly models are simplistic and easily read. This allows them to get away with not only the speed of the game, but also the constant bombardment of sensations and effects. This is definitely an appeal of the game, and probably what pulled me in, but it's not what kept me there. For that, we'll have to continue. Okay, next up is fantasy. All games have an element of fantasy. However, I do not believe that is a driving factor in this game. However, that does not mean it is absent. This game's fever dream of a world definitely adds to its overall aesthetic. But it's a supporting factor, not a driving one. Its narrative is even less of a factor. We can say the same things about narrative as fantasy, only they apply even less. Something that is a main draw, however, is challenge. If I was to say games as an obstacle course, you would first think of the platforming genre. And if this game has one thing going for it, it is the unique platforming movement, and all the challenges that it can bring. Trading the vertical jump that most platforming heroes have for a horizontal dash. Making it so you really need to think about how you're going to make it to your destination. This has always been a part of good platformer design. However, Yellow Taxi manages to take this to its extreme without feeling like a puzzle game. The game is single player, so there's no fellowship. As much as I wish I had more friends that were willing to talk about this game. Let's go over Discovery. In Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom, there are multiple hidden mechanics that the game doesn't tell you about, such as boost cancelling, which allows you to get a small jump, the backflip, where you brake while trying to do a boost. You can also double the strength of your boost when pressing accelerate at just the right time. None of these tricks are particularly hard. However, the fact the player had to discover them, either by trial or error or talking to the hidden NPCs on the map, makes you feel skilled in a way that wouldn't feel nearly the same as if they just taught it to you in the opening tutorial. As for exploration, it's a collectathon platformer. There are big open worlds to explore, to find as many gears as you can to unlock more open worlds to explore. There are a couple boss fights that you have to do, but 90% of the game is exploring. You're exploring for gears, you're exploring for coins, you're exploring for new hats to buy, you're exploring for rabbits to unlock post-game challenge levels. I thought I'd 100% completed the game, and then I found an item that let me play the original Game Jam version of the game. This game has so much to explore, as expected of the genre. Now, bearing all on that in mind, we can determine the pillars of Yellow Taxi Go's Vroom's aesthetics. First up is sensation, second is challenge, and third is exploration. All other factors of the game's aesthetics live to serve these three pillars. And this is the first thing a player will think about experiencing. However, we want a deeper understanding, so we must move on to the dynamics. Let's start with, what are dynamics? Dynamics are built out of mechanics and work to create aesthetics. A good example of this is, to support the fever dream aesthetic, Yellow Taxi Go's Vroom wants you to move fast. That's why, after it's finished making sure you understand the movement, in the second level, you are put on a timer. But this is no simple race to the end. This is still a collectathon after all, and this game wants you to dart all around the map. Personally, if I'd faced this design problem, I would be stumped. How do you get people to explore and to do it fast? When being fast means you need to stay on a route. Yellow Taxi solves this problem with how you get more time. You are unlikely to ever be caught out by the time limit, with a couple exceptions for certain levels, but it is something you have to watch out for. You are going to need to go out of your way to get extra time by delivering passengers as a taxi would around the level. Each passenger winds the taxi up a bit when they get in, and depending on how fast you got them to their destination, they'll give you a few more seconds when they get out. These dynamics encourage the player to zip around the map at top speed, and discourages them from over-analysis, trying to find collectibles. Collectibles are rarely hidden in a way where you would need to finally comb through the level to find them. They simply exist to make sure you've explored everywhere, even if you're rushing through it 80 miles an hour, as the game wants. This ingenious mechanic also helps balance the difficulty. Taxi runs are easy enough to do, so if you want you can build up a lot of extra time in order to find other gears, or if you're impatient, you can try to gather the gears fast and do the bare minimum. And if you really explore the level, you'll find enough stopwatches that you won't even need to worry about the time limit. It is rarely ever an issue, however it encourages a certain style of play. Another dynamic is with the coins and the hats. And I feel conflicted on the coins, because coins are a finite resource, with a few exceptions. They don't respawn, and you use them to buy hats, which are also limited, as there are only so many hats you can buy. These two things seem logical. However, the tricky part comes when you die, in which case you lose some coins. You're not locked out of all the cool hats forever though, if you die too much and use up all the coins, as by crashing into enough things, the amount is based on what world you're in, you can get some bonus coins. These are renewable. And as much as coins being non-renewable feels icky to me, there is a good design reason for this. They are an easy way to see if you've been to part of a level before. This helps eliminate the need for players to go through with a fine comb, and encourages the speedy gameplay that it is built on. However, with all of that said, the most important dynamics for this game is the movement of the player. It is unlike anything I've ever seen before, but I desperately hope it's something I'm going to see more often in future. While with the advanced techniques, you do have some vertical movement options, your best bet for movement is always going to be to find a ramp. This makes the levels feel more connected, as to get to a high up place in one part of the level, you're going to need to find a ramp in a nearby spot, and the level design of Yellow Taxi runs with this, and gives you many creative ways to get around the level, which is good because you are going to be doing laps of it in order to try and get a hold of everything. This is why it's important for some taxi journeys to have gears locked behind them, to force players to engage with this side of the game. These dynamics all support the fast-paced gameplay that this game is built off of, and create its aesthetic. But to really know how this is achieved, we must finally look at the mechanics. Mechanics are the little chunks that, when put together, create dynamics. And I think the best example of this that we have to work with is the player movement. When the game starts, all you can do is turn left, turn right, and accelerate. Also you can brake, but seriously, who does that? Now while this might not seem interesting, it is important that the game gets you used to these. But there are some nuances to these mechanics. First off, even though it's not very realistic, this car has a tight turn radius and can turn while still. Its turning radius is a bit wide compared to other platforming heroes, but the level design accommodates for this. The player should never feel like they're fighting with the character. You can also mash the accelerate button while falling, to slow fall. Not very useful, but gives the player some more control. With this moveset, they will get you used to the physics of the game, how gravity works, how you can accelerate, and how jumping off ramps is your best way to gain elevation. Then they introduce you to one of the best designed mechanics that I have ever seen, the flip of will. This is going to be your main option of movement. First time you use it, it's going to spin you around, then give you a burst of speed forward to help you clear a jump. Next, the game's going to teach you that you can hold accelerate in order to go further. This game gives you a really good amount of air control, and you're going to need it with the way you're going to be constantly flying off ramps. You are fully able to brake and accelerate while in the air. In fact, you can even use the flip of will in the air, multiple times even. You can use it again in the air even if you used it to leave the ground. And then after that, you can use it again after a cooldown. And for the first level, that's all they're going to tell you about the flip of will. But there are some hidden mechanics they're going to tell you about later. First off is the flip cancel. By cancelling the flip of will, by pressing the button again, the flip will be cancelled and you will gain a vertical boost. And of course you can do this again in the air. It's important that the movement is so expressive. The taxi is just as capable as any other platforming hero, just in a different way. And this is what stops the game from feeling like a puzzle game. The remaining two hidden mechanics are the super flip, where if you press accelerate at just the right time, you will get double the boost. As much as I don't like execution-based challenges, the way this works is that eventually later on in the game you'll be able to consistently get this boost. Even for less skilled players, I would presume. This will allow them to collect cogs they couldn't collect before in earlier levels, allowing them to go back and self-adjust the difficulty curve. Even though the character hasn't gained any new abilities, they have. And the final hidden mechanic is the backflip. If you cancel a flip of will using the reverse button, you will flip backwards to twice the height of a normal flip cancel. This is powerful, but not very fast, as you have to fully turn yourself away from where you want to go. This helps to adjust the difficulty curve even more, as skilled players won't slow down to use this technique. However, less skilled players can use it to grab some cogs more easily than those who aren't using the backflip. So that is the player mechanics that are creating the dynamics of the game. That was insightful, but there's got to be more to it than that. But what kept me coming back until I 100%ed the game? Okay, why then? What kept me coming back? Well, let's look at some other game design theories. Maybe it was the gameplay loop. I doubt it though, as other than some specific details to do with the level design, it is very similar to other platformers in that regard. You collect the things to go to more levels to collect more things. And I know there wasn't any compulsion loops involved. Games that hack your brain tend not to leave you wanting more. It is one of the strengths of the collectathon genre. However, I think Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom does an excellent job of getting you into a state of flow. Let's try and analyse the game from a perspective of a new player. We start with a small intro cutscene, and then we are giving the simplified version of our character without the flip of will. The tutorial in this game is built for replayability, as if you know what to do, it'll take less than a second. But once you've got a handle of the controls, drive into the lab and collect the 3 gears. 2 of them you can just drive straight to, and the third teaches you that sometimes you're going to have to drive off ramps. It's impossible to explore too much of the lab without the flip of will. So far, everything has been easy, but is moving at a fast enough pace that players who know what they're doing won't get bored. That is a core element of this game. Speed. Doing things faster makes them harder. The best way for players to self-regulate difficulty is to do it faster. This game has a built-in speedrun timer, so you know it's capitalizing on that. Once you're into the first level, you will come across a jump that is impossible with your character the way it is. After talking to Mario, you unlock the flip of will, and you have the full moveset for your character. There are 2 more unlockables, However, those are both temporary power-ups. There's also a switch in one of the levels that turns some blocks solid, but your character's base moveset is now complete. But to stop the player from getting overwhelmed by it, they are not told about everything it has to offer immediately. In fact, for the foreseeable future, they are not going to need to cancel their boosts at all. Most of the gears can be accessed without use of any of the hidden mechanics. However, the golden rabbits you will have to come back for. There are also a few gears that players who are struggling in later levels can come back for once they know the techniques. Of course, more advanced players can just zip around the level as they already know the techniques. Players are unlikely to move on to the next area until they've gotten all the gears that they think they can get with their skill level. This is important for the game's balancing, as it stops players from getting frustrated or anxious if the challenges in a level are becoming too hard. And this is how the collectathon genre manages flow. With expressive character movement, players won't get bored because there will always be a slightly more efficient way to get all the collectibles they need, and they will look for that. And players shouldn't get frustrated or anxious, as there's always somewhere else for them to go if they're struggling. However, the levels do still need to get more difficult over time. And this is why, in our next level, we are introduced to the time limit and wind-up mechanics. I've already explained these, but these are a step up in difficulty. After that, we're given another level without a time limit. However, the arcade level takes place above a giant void. It is one of my favourite levels in the game, and takes place on tracks suspended above a bottomless pit. The last level challenged the player's time management. This level challenges their precision. Skilled players can try and make jumps to save time, going across large gaps, while less skilled players will go around. But here we run into a bit of a problem. Let's say you're a mistake that's terrible at everything, and you can't get gears from the levels you have access to so far. What would you do if you got frustrated in all the levels? Well, you would explore the hub world, of course. It is unlikely that this would happen this early. However, it is important to mention that at any point, the game has accounted for what happens if you can't get any more gears in the levels you have access to currently. At first, it seems there's not that many gears in the hub world. Some of them even require hats that you need to find in certain levels. However, if you exit the lab, it will take you to Granny's Island. This is a big area to explore, and there's hardly anything that's gated by progression. Meaning, if you come out here, you will almost certainly be able to scrounge up the gears you need to move on to the next level. There's even some levels hidden out here, from pizza-based time challenges, to a gym level where they're going to teach you about some advanced mechanics, to the sewer and dog poop levels. So now we have looked at the progression in difficulty of the first 3 levels, starting with a level that teaches you the mechanics and gives you a safe space to use them, and then the next level puts you on a time limit. The level after that puts you above a bottomless pit. We have also explored how the game allows players to self-regulate its difficulty. However, this is a little harder for me to verify, as I have only experienced it with my skill level. Is the game perfect? No, as I've already said, I don't like how it handles death, and there are a few parts of the game it forces you through a choke point, mainly when unlocking those power-ups I mentioned earlier. The most egregious of this is when unlocking the invincibility spring power-up, where you have to do a stealth section that significantly changes up some mechanics and can lead to a lot of frustration or anxiety, followed up with a boss fight that uses randomness However, the core principles of the game are solid, and it only causes a problem when it deviates from these principles. However, some of these issues I wouldn't know how to fix. Sometimes there are some sections of your game that you need your player to play. Changing up the mechanics for these bits would be a bad idea. However, removing them entirely is a step too far. I feel like the game only takes coins away from you when you die because that's what other games do. But maybe there's a game design consequence I hadn't thought of for letting the player die as much as they want without consequence. When developing my own game, I will consider how I can make my character's movement in a way that forces players to consider the environment, make movement that is simple to understand, but gives great expression for players who want to do things fast. But most of all, I will decide on the aesthetic of my game, and then make dynamics that support these aesthetics, picking 1 or 2 core areas for the game to stand on, and then having everything else support those areas. Of course, it wouldn't hurt if I could think of such an ingenious, multi-purpose mechanic, but the most unique mechanics in the world couldn't save a game that's designed poorly. In conclusion, the aesthetics of your game are important, and it's a lot more than just what the game looks like. A unique mechanic helps draw players in, especially if it changes how you think about the levels and the challenges. I have gushed about this game for too long now. I will see you again when I have something else to blab about.